Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. The meeting will be starting shortly. While we wait, let's learn more about Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well. Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. The meeting will be starting shortly. While we wait, let's learn more about Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.
April 4th, 2023. Sustainability Advisory Committee, call it to order. And it's a joint committee with Energy, and we've got some exciting stuff happening tonight. We're going to have a nice presentation of the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership, which is not easy to say. They have a great acronym instead, NEEP. And we'll get to that in a few minutes, but we want to open up with public comments. Actually, before I do that, I want to welcome Dan Chartrand, who I think you are our new select board rep for sustainability. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right. So welcome aboard, and
thank you.
And glad to have you along. And we
good to be here.
I think we've had Nico for 2 or 3 years, which was great. But it's I think changing the guard and fresh ideas are great as well. So it should be a lot of fun.
Excellent.
But with that, we'll open the floor to public comments. With the massive crowd we've packed in here tonight, and I don't see any. So with that, we'll move on to approval of...
Can I ask for a favor?
Yes, sir.
I don't know everyone.
Oh,
could I get some introductions?
Absolutely. Why don't we do this? We'll start at this end of the dais and tell us who you are and introduce yourself.
I'm Stacy Rogers. I joined last year, so I'm rounding out my first year. Nice to meet you.
I'm Jackie Ojala. Been maybe 2 years now.
Thanks, Jackie. Nice to meet you.
Chris Zygmunt, I'm the vice chair. Chetna is actually away in Nepal, so I'm just chairing tonight.
I saw that.
I think I've been here since the beginning, so yeah.
Awesome.
I'm Ryan Jean. This is my first year, and I'm the newest member.
Nice to meet you, Ryan.
Nice to meet you.
Good afternoon, Adam Dunville. This is my 2.5 years, I guess.
Okay. Nice to meet you, Adam.
Yep.
Maybe I'm 3
Thank
then.
you.
Yeah, no worries. Glad to do it. Did you get meeting minutes from last time? No.
But I wouldn't, yeah, it's fine.
So for committee members, were there any questions or things you wanted to bring up on last month's March meeting minutes? Everything look okay? Can I get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor of approving last month's minutes, say aye.
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 All right, March minutes are approved. That's minutes. With that, we're going to move into our action items, and we're going to open up with our presentation tonight. So yeah, let's introduce Kristen Murphy, our sustainability planner.
Just going to cue the slides. Good evening, everyone. Kristen Murphy, the Conservation and Sustainability Planner. I am here tonight, and I'm really excited for this presentation. Just to give a little bit, let me make sure I'm functioning. Yeah, just to give a little bit of a background of why we have an outside speaker today. Both the Energy and Sustainability Committee many meetings ago raised a desire to talk about building energy efficiencies, how to incentivize it. And we thought it would really be important for us to have a good understanding about what the energy codes do, what they don't do, and how other entities outside of Exeter have used them to sort of incentivize energy efficiency. So I'm here tonight to super happy to introduce Michael Rossi. He's with NEEP, which is much easier to say. And then online, he has a coworker, Cornelia Wu, who may be challenged to hear us because the only microphone she's hearing through is to the left of the screen. So we'll try to coordinate it through texting with her if there's questions that we need help
And I
with.
see Cornelia on the laptop. Cornelia, are you hearing this okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh,
terrific.
perfect.
There you go.
All right. So, Michael, I'll kick it off to you then.
Thank you, everyone. I'll bring it over to Cornelia to start.
Oh, great.
Okay. Thank you, Kristen, for having us to speak to the Sustainability Advisory Committee tonight. Very excited to be here. I'm Cornelia Wu, Senior Manager, Codes and Standards at NEEP, and joining in person, as you've seen, is Michael Rossi, Senior Associate building energy codes, and he is a resident of New Hampshire. So NEEP is a part of a national network of regional energy efficiency organizations, or RIOs. The 6 RIOs work through funded partnerships with the U.S. Department of Energy and other groups. And among many other things, we support state and local efforts on building codes and appliance standards and related policies through technical assistance, research, and working groups. Our region is the 12 Mid-Atlantic and Northeast states and DC. And our mission is to accelerate regional collaboration to promote advanced energy efficiency and related solutions in homes, buildings, industry, and communities. So NEEP's we've been providing technical assistance and advisement for model code adoptions over the last 3 model code cycles, ending with 2018. So we've been attending board hearings and public testimonies for many years now, and following what's been happening in the state and, of course, the states around New Hampshire very closely. Next slide, please. And we are currently working with the Energy Efficiency and Sustainable Energy Board and other energy efficiency groups in the state to help in the implementation of the IRA funds, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, BIL funded programs, and to provide input on the next round of energy efficiency programs for the state. So as you probably know, this federal funding is the grant applications opened this year, and they'll go forward for another 9 or 10 years. Next slide, please. So again, in the past, with our communities team, we've worked on high performance schools, and we do maintain a list of schools and case studies throughout the state. Next slide, please. So a base code overview. So you'll see on the chart, starting with 2015, those are the states, Maine, DC, and West Virginia, where 2015 is currently in effect. West Virginia has just recently changed to 2015, so we're not seeing a new shift yet, whereas DC and Maine are both switching up to 2021. And with the asterisk, what you're seeing is that means they are both updating or creating stretch codes. So for instance, while Maine is on 2015, Portland and South Portland are actually on the stretch code of 2021 already. And when Maine updates to the 2021 base, which will happen this year, they will need a new stretch code, which it seems it will probably not be the 2024 since that is not ready yet, but it will probably be the 2021 with strengthening amendments. And when Michael talks a little bit later, you'll see, what those different options are and what they mean. In the next batch, you see the most common grouping in our region, which is states on the 2018, but moving to the 2021, 5 of which are in process of updating or creating stretch codes. And interestingly, New York is jumping the 2021 and going straight to 2024 for the base code. And finally, we have Connecticut and New Jersey. They have already adopted and implemented the 2021. Next slide, please. Yes, I can see that now. So here you'll see that the 2024 is expected to be about 10% better than the 2021 IECC, and this is based on a normalized energy use on the y-axis, which you probably can't quite read in that text. But the 1975 use is set at 100. So you're seeing both the residential in blue and the commercial in green dropping every year since 1970. Next slide, please. And one more. So in terms of policies for energy and emissions reduction, a lot of this starts with commitments, local, state, and regional emissions reduction, renewable commitments, whether a state has to get to 80% of their production from a base year of, say, somewhere in 1990 by 2030. Every state has their metrics set a little bit differently, but they go about getting there in similar ways. So one of the ways is looking at new buildings and major renovation. So you'll see building energy codes, base codes, stretch codes, which are also sometimes known as opt-in codes, renewables codes, zero codes. And there are some different ways that states can go about doing this. For instance, or jurisdictions in Boston, you'll see carbon neutral zoning, so that the embodied carbon issue is tied up with a zoning ordinance as opposed to through the energy code itself. So there are a variety of ways that these things are looked at. When you get to appliance standards, NEEP actually has a state appliance standards database. And we work with many of the states in our region with that, and we're starting to go out beyond our region as well. Existing buildings is a little bit trickier because you're working with building owners who in the past have not anticipated that they would be affected necessarily by energy codes. So this tends to go out over a longer period of time, starts out with benchmarking to see where things actually are. And then states, usually cities such as New York City, DC, Boston, have all implemented building performance standards. Next slide, please. So for stretch codes, and this will get to what Michael will be describing. As you see, there are many different ways of looking at it. The upper left, you're looking at the ICC. Many jurisdictions will just go up, 3 years up one code cycle ahead. So from 2018 to 2021 or 2021 to 2024, once the 2024 is available. British Columbia has an energy step code. So by year, each step is added. Or by code cycle, rather, not every single year. NEEP has a Massachusetts Zero Energy Code. FIAS, which used to be known as Passive House Institute US, has a zero code now. NBI has a building decarbonization code. And of course, the DOE has a zero energy ready home. You'll see in other states that sometimes portions of these, for instance, Passive House, will become available as what are known as alternative compliance pathways. So not necessarily adopting the whole code, but just using it as an alternative. Next slide, please. And finally, existing state stretch codes in the NEEP region. You'll see that what's listed here, there's a lot of variety. Massachusetts actually has 2 stretch codes. They have their base stretch, which about 300, the vast majority of their municipalities have signed on to. And when they came up with their updated stretch this year, all of those municipalities were automatically upgraded. And as a result, their specialized opt-in, which is their sort of extra tier up, has gotten most of the attention, and at least 30 of their jurisdictions have expressed interest in upgrading to that standard. At this point, maybe 7 to 10 have already adopted it. New York has a 2020 stretch that is going to go up to 2023 shortly. And then you'll see DC has an all-new construction electric stipulation, and we'll use Appendix Z of the IECC. So you'll see throughout in different places where you see under, for instance, Maine, IECC Zero Energy Appendix. Sometimes you see the Green Construction Code. There are a lot of codes, and there's a lot of knowledge out there to pull from and study case studies. And next slide, please. And with that, I'll turn it over to Michael.
Are happening in New Hampshire. So Durham has Ordinance 2011-01, Section 38.5 that says current printed edition of the International Energy Conservation Code, which is what the acronym for IECC is, shall be used for all energy code construction. So, and basically it's something where they always adopt the latest edition of the code. So they're, regardless of where the state's at, they're always at the most recent published version. And Keene also has a stretch code where they have compliance via LEED, Green Globe's National Green Building Standard, which is the standard of International Code Council 700, and the International Green Construction Code. And that's through that ordinance noted there, 2016-01C. So those are some local examples of what places in the states have been doing. Here are some other regional and national codes and zero codes. So I'm not going to go through this full list, but as you see, there's a lot of different municipalities and states that have adopted some form of a stretch code or a zero code.
Michael.
Yes.
Can you explain stretch code in depth?
What is
Yeah.
I'm not getting what it is.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So there's two types of codes. There's the base codes, which are model codes that are a nationally published standard that are adopted by states to sort of govern where each state has to be on an energy code. And a stretch code is a step above that. So it's basically a more efficient version of the code that adds additional layers of energy efficiency to help promote energy savings. So if your base code, for example, is the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code, which is what New Hampshire has, the stretch code would be sort of a step above what's in the 2018 efficiency-wise. So it would add in different provisions, whether that's related to insulation or air sealing, renewable energy generation, better mechanical ventilation systems. So something like that, sort of, that you add to a code, more efficient.
So any
options.
given town is picking and choosing something and adding it onto their base, or any given state?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different types of national model codes out there. So the two big ones for residential and commercial buildings are the International Energy Conservation Code and the American Society of Heating and Refrigerating and Cooling Engineers, ASHRAE is the acronym, I don't know if I got that right. 90.1, which is traditionally used for commercial buildings. So those are the two big model codes that are out there. In addition, there's above code like model languages out there that sort of goes above and beyond those two, or provides sort of alternative pathways to compliance or separate proposals. So for example, with a 2018 air sealing requirement might be 3 air changes per hour. Lower is better. So for a passive house standard, which is a lot more of a like airtight home, the limit would be 0.06 or 0.6 air changes per hour. So much more airtight than as you would see in a model code.
And a state is adopting that, or a city, or a?
So states primarily adopt the base code, which is what the model code would be, and a city would adopt sort of above code measures. So items of that go above and beyond where the state is.
And who decides that?
Typically, it could be decided by a municipality through an ordinance. Sometimes there are states like Massachusetts that have that at the state level, where what they do is they implement the Green Communities program. And with that program, they go through specific proposals that you have to meet in order to comply with the stretch code. So, for example, for mechanical ventilation, meaning like bath fans, in traditional codes for the 2018 and 21 IECC, you're allowed to use bath fans if you're in certain climate zones. But with the Massachusetts amendment, you have to use more efficient ventilation equipment of a energy recovery ventilator or a heat recovery ventilator, which sort of goes above and beyond the traditional ventilation requirements. So that's an example of a proposal that was added into the Massachusetts stretch code that they could do that goes above the.
I mean, what group decides on their stretch code?
It really does depend municipality to municipality. Some groups have local ordinances that develop stretch codes. Some states develop develop at the state level and sort of allow municipalities to adopt it. It really all depends.
Well, for example, the Energy Committee helped to do an ordinance where any new parking lot comes in, electric charging cable conduits and panel boxes need to be installed, even if the unit is not installed completely. Is that a stretch code?
That would qualify with one example of what could be considered a stretch code. So that could be one proposal you could add to the type of code. So I'm going to get in a little bit more later in the presentation, I'm going to get to specific examples of what you could do for stretch codes and sort of opportunities out there.
But just for a last little kind of high level clarity for a guy who's not understanding a whole lot of it.
Yep.
A stretch code is selecting some elements versus a town or a municipality or a state going all the way up to the next 3-year base code.
Yeah, so it's basically going. Some places like Maine, for example, adopt the later. They adopt the code that their state's not on. So you really could do it either way. One, you could add specific proposals on top of the base code that make it stronger
Yeah.
and make it more energy efficient, or you could adopt a more recent version of the code
okay. Yeah.
that in itself would be more efficient because it's a later version of it.
All right.
So moving on, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff going on in New Hampshire here. So we have the Climate Action Plan that was adopted in 2009 that sets greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, 85% by 2050. In addition, the utilities in New Hampshire have a statewide energy efficiency plan. And as you see here, some of the incentive programs that are provided are above code measures that sort of could be going along with a stretch code. So for example, if you're going to potentially adopt a stretch code and have an alternative compliance pathway of DOE zero energy ready homes, there are incentive structures already put in place for that type of program. So some of these potential measures could result in more incentives for builders that are going to that level. In addition, I'll give a sort of high-level state overview of what's going on right now with the New Hampshire State Building Code Review Board. So as of July 1st, 2022, New Hampshire adopted the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code with some weakening amendments. And right now, the Building Code Review Board is currently reviewing the 2021 version of the code, and we'll have a public hearing for it that's currently scheduled for June. So right now, sort of where they're at in the process is that they're going to be meeting in April on the 14th to go over a subcommittee to go over potential amendments to the code. They're going to be introducing the amendments in the May meeting, and in June is going to be a public hearing where members of the public can speak on behalf of either supporting or nothing.
Are these weakening amendments or strengthening amendments that they're going to be proposing?
We'll see. I could see it potentially being weakening, but it really depends on what the committee comes up with, and we haven't seen what's in them yet, so we can't really engage what to expect basically. So that's basically to be determined. And the Building Code Review Board meets every second Friday of the month in Concord, so next meeting is April 14th. And the code will basically, after they review it now, it'll go to the state legislature for a vote in 2024. And one thing that's interesting is, so for the meeting agenda on February 10th, they actually had several possible recommendations for the energy code. One would be that they keep the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code in place until the 2024 version comes out and is published, and having the 2021 IECC be adopted as a stretch code by municipalities if they'd like, and that they can go above and beyond the 2021 with the 2018 International Green Construction Code or the ASHRAE 189.1 standard. So basically what this means is that the state might be proposing a stretch code in itself on the state level for municipalities to consider. And that they would basically give a level to say, you can adopt this type of stretch code, which is 21, or you can go above and beyond and adopt these more stringent standards that's shown in the IGCC or ASHRAE 189.1. So that's one option of what they could consider. They're still not sure what motion they're going to be going with. The second one could be adopt the 21 IECC as the state's model code, or adopt it to be with an effective date of July 2024. So we'll see where the state moves here, but this is sort of an overview of where the state's at with their model code adoption. Do you guys have any questions now before we dive into more of the specific proposals? Sorry, there's a lot of high-level technical terms and stuff, so we apologize.
Yeah, no worries. I definitely have a question.
Sure.
I think that it has something to do with what they were asking. One of the slides mentioned Durham adopting language that said using the current IECC printed. Is that is that in their RSA? What is the method of which they adopted that?
Yeah, so basically, I believe they did that through a municipal ordinance. So when I share the slides with you at the end of this, there's a link to the ordinance itself there, but I can go back and give you the number.
Excellent. That's completely
Great.
fine. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. All right, any other questions?
So it seems like it's zoning ordinance
Yeah,
versus a town. Well, yeah, I guess we can look into that, but that's interesting.
I think it's a town ordinance.
A
that the
town ordinance.
Town council would have had to pass.
Okay.
So it would be our select board that would need to pass something like this.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, I believe so.
I wonder in our government if a citizen petition certainly can drive an ordinance.
It certainly could.
Yeah, interesting.
Or so could the regular process, right?
Could as well.
Right.
Yeah, good as well.
The other question I have is about existing building benchmarks.
Yep.
Obviously, the effect on new construction is the simpler way to reduce carbon emissions, et cetera. Bringing existing buildings up to meet these energy goals is one of the more difficult things.
Yeah.
And obviously, you look at our town, 1638, right? So like we got some old buildings here.
Right, yeah.
So, the question for you is, how have you seen those existing building benchmarks be made?
Yeah,
And
that's a good question.
are they successful?
Yeah, so one thing we've seen, especially in the model code, and this is actually in the 2024 draft that's currently not published, but so one section of the model code itself has chapter for existing buildings, and what that is what you can do if you're going through an alteration, addition, or change of use. So basically, if a building's being like a full gut rehab, where you're tearing everything out and putting everything in, in those situations, you have to comply with some aspects of the energy code.
Certainly.
So that's sort of the extent of where the code can hit there.
Understood.
One thing that's in the 24 draft that's interesting is they have additional efficiency measures that you have to hit if you're going through one of those things. So traditionally, the requirements of the information that's going through one of those alterations isn't going to be as strict as you would if it's new construction, because sometimes you can't really hit those more stringent targets.
Sure.
But it sort of gives a list of measures you could do in order to meet those requirements.
Understood.
So, yep.
So if somebody's doing an insulation upgrade through like Button Up, New Hampshire,
Yeah.
one of those programs, are they required to go to a certain level or not to get the monies, or is it that not an issue when you're doing those upgrades? Grants.
I do think it comes down to the specific incentive program that you're working with. So I think when it comes down to those types of decisions of how much better it has to be, it sort of depends program by program, I would think.
Yeah, it makes sense that it would defer to whatever the state has adopted, if it's a state, a state program, you know what I mean? So if the state of New Hampshire is now at 2018, is that what we said?
Yep.
So then those would be the standards by which you'd be measured against.
Yep.
Maybe.
Yep. So any other questions that I can go over before we sort of dive into more specific stretch code options that you have? Great. Well, with that being said, here's what we can think about if you're looking to adopt the stretch code for Exeter. So first off, I want to note this isn't a formal proposal. This is just us saying, here's some ideas that are sort of based on model practices that happen across the region. So, yep.
Are you going to be able to share these slides at the end?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So, so this is sort of what we would say for a potential proposal. Nothing specific here. This is more just what's like what we think could be good for the area based on what we've seen elsewhere.
Absolutely.
So first off, you could potentially model it after Durham, where you adopt the latest energy code when it becomes available. So that would be, you could adopt the 2021 IECC, and then when the 24 gets published, have something in there saying, maybe we'll adopt the 24 within a year of its publication or something. And typically with these, you want to leave a little bit of a time for a grace period in order to train builders and code officials to understand some of the new requirements. So traditionally, states have about a 6-month grace period where you can adopt between when you get the ordinance passed and start to enforce the code. You could also model it after Keene and adopt the latest version of the International Green Construction Code, which just is traditionally a higher level of energy and sustainability than the other model code, the International Energy Conservation Code. You could also look to adopt the 2021 with strengthening amendments. So what that might be is, as I talked about earlier, potentially adding in better mechanical ventilation equipment, or more having a more airtight home or airtight ducts. You could sort of add in some measures that sort of help increase the efficiency of a home. And there's a bunch of potential considerations there that sort of is up to the state to consider. That could even be like insulation levels. So if you have R19 in your exterior wall, maybe you could boost that a bit. So it really depends on what measures we could look at, but there's certainly a bunch in the code that you could add as strengthening. And then also consider adopting alternative compliance pathways, such as DOE Zero Energy Ready Homes and Passive House. And there's two specific versions of Passive House out there. There's FIAS that Cornelia mentioned earlier, and Passive House International. So there's two different standards, and what those are traditionally third-party verified standards. So you have a third-party rater or inspector go to the site, do a full rating of a home, and come up with a report, and in the report, it's if you meet those standards or not, is sort of what it comes down to. And in addition, there's also electrification ready provisions you could consider. Now, what this would be is essentially pre-wiring a home to accommodate future installation of electric equipment. So, for example, if someone really is tied to their gas stove, and they really want that, you can have your gas stove, but also have a plug nearby. So 20 years from now, if you want to retrofit it and swap in for an electric stove, you have the option to do that without having to retrofit your home after the fact, which would potentially cost a lot more to install it 20 years down the line than you can right up front. So there's electrification ready provisions you can add for cooking equipment, clothes dryers, and water heaters, and even heating and cooling equipment as well. All right, so any other questions? Yes.
On that last slide, can you tell me what a zero energy ready house is from the Department of Energy?
Sure, yeah, so what that is it's a home that has to meet a certain specific level of standards that is above the traditional code requirements. So if a model code says you have to have this much, or this as an energy rating index score, which is basically like a home that you get a value that's associated with a house, like similar to like a miles per gallon sticker of a house. For example, the model code might say you have to have an ERI of 55 to meet the requirements of this model code. If you're going with DOE Zero Energy Ready Homes, there's other thresholds you have to meet in order to qualify for that. So
what does the zero energy mean?
So what that means is it's similar to what I talked about below with the electrification readiness. So it's homes that are essentially pre-wired to accommodate future all-electric homes. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to put on solar panels, but it has to be solar ready. So you have to have the conduit going up there. You have to have a place to install it. You have to have a place on the electrical panel that can accommodate it. Those kinds of things.
Okay.
So it's more like a net zero ready.
Yeah.
Okay. Versus zero energy. Okay.
Yep.
That was going to be I want to see that.
Yeah. So and the thing is too, in the national model codes like the IECC, they have appendices in there that do reflect potential solar ready zones. So if you want to make a house solar ready, you could accommodate that as a stretch code and say we adopt this code with this appendix. There's one there as well as one for zero energy homes. And what that would require is a specific energy rating index score that I just talked about with a lower threshold after you accommodate solar so that it gets to zero. But again, that's sort of up for the discussion if you guys would be interested in that. But those are some things we've sort of seen in the region and beyond.
So, Michael, it seems to me one of the toughest things to fix after the fact is the position of the home, the layout of the roof, the angles of the roof. So, where would, if that was our standard, where what would that be classified as in your list there? Would that be a passive house standard, or?
So a lot of these that I mentioned are directly related to new construction. So there isn't a lot here that would be influential in an existing home.
Right. So I mean, if we wanted to ensure that all new, subdivisions or commercial buildings were sited to maximize, solar, or would that be passive home, or what would that energy ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, the thing with these is there's very specific benchmarks of energy provisions you have to meet in order to apply to some of these standards. So I think honestly it depends standard to standard what it would be, but generally what those have is basically specifically a checklist of information that you have to meet. So you have to have this level insulation, this efficiency window, this efficiency equipment potentially, this your house has to be this airtight when you do air infiltration test. And it's there's just criteria you have to meet in order to meet these requirements.
So it's multiple points. It's not just...
right. So it's not just one thing. It's really just a scope of a bunch of different options you can consider that go along with it, the prescriptive path.
And can you just describe or define what a passive house is? I thought that was angled with big windows so that the heat comes through.
Yeah, that's
very insulated.
Right. Yeah. So it's a really airtight home that does very, as you said, very efficient windows, very well designed so that it can meet some of those more stringent targets. So really, the whole part of the design is really efficient. So it's sort of like the highest level efficiency home you can build to in that standard.
So are these our only options, or can you sort of do it like an a la carte? Can you kind of make up your own?
Yes.
You can?
Yep, you can. So you can pick what options sort of best suit your area when you want to consider this. So that's sort of on the level of what you can consider for adding as a stretch code.
And so this weakening amendments, I just get a kick out of that. So, so say we adopt the latest IECC, and we decide, because we're really an old town, 1638 order, we weaken something in it that could be controversial or whatever. Is that a possibility? In other words, can you accept the 2024 IECC with taking out a couple things?
So typically to be considered a stretch code, you have to only do things that add to it and make it more efficient. You can't really go back and make it less efficient, but that's sort of just how it works in that sense.
And I had one, sorry. So you had mentioned that when you adopt stretch codes or whatever, there, obviously there's an education process for the contractors that are working in town, the building officials. So how are other towns on the town level addressing that? I mean, how are we educating?
Also, Cornelia is raising her hand to answer as well. So I can see that. Sorry about that. Sorry, Cornelia.
Yeah, I'd love to pass it over to Cornelia.
Sorry, I raised my hands about the 2021 with amendments, because it is something that a lot of the other states and jurisdictions are asking about. I know you're currently on the 2018, but as I said, the Inflation Reduction Act, those funds, they come to about $1 billion. Exactly $1 billion, actually 330 and then 670, and they are tied to use of the 2021 without weakening amendments. So essentially, the 2021 or what's considered equal or greater. So that's just something to be aware of when it comes to looking at that down the future. I know it's something that you're obviously not eligible for right now, but within the next 10 years, one would hope that certainly does become an issue.
Funds, the baseline has to be up to the 2021 code, and you certainly could stretch beyond that, but the base has to be up to the 2021 code.
Right. So if you have, let's say you had what were technically called weakening amendments, but you could or some kind of amendment that you could prove was either equal to or greater, that would be all right. But any weakening amendment, any downgrading of any metric would basically render you ineligible, even though you're on the 2021.
Okay, that's kind of
Very important.
very important. So
Yeah,
I guess
red flag,
realize,
for sure.
In order for residents of Exeter, commercial entities in Exeter, to receive those fundings, to receive those funds, we would need to already have adopted the 2021 IECC.
I think the state level.
The 2021 base, is that what you said?
At the
I
state
believe
level.
that's what is
Yep,
the.
that's correct.
Yeah, so the state has to accept fully the 2021 without any weakening restrictions for any New Hampshire resident to
We roll back
have
to
access to
the
that.
motions that the state is considering.
Yeah.
Sure, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. One more.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
There you go. So in this scenario, then, it's either 2 or 3.
Yeah, so I think what it is that the state is looking into potentially adopting some weakening amendments to the code. Again, we'll see in the upcoming meetings if there's going to be a thing or not. But it seems like right now, a lot of the amendments they're proposing as of now are carried over from 2018. So one of those is actually for commercial buildings, removal of a section that is additional efficiency requirements. So by deleting that section from the code, that ultimately could impact their ability to get those funds. And it seems like there might be some more potential weakening amendments coming up from these discussions in April that will be presented to the committee in May.
Yeah.
Can you tell me the difference between motion 2 and motion 3? There's just one extra sentence on motion 2 that says report compliance to Congress through the DOE. What does that signify?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what that means there is that one would be basically adopting it as soon as possible, whereas the other one would sort of be waiting till July 24 to adopt it. So, and I think what the compliance means there is that it's saying that they're in compliance with what they need to be in order to receive those IRA funds.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things is that we have the, as shocking and as disturbing as it might be that, New Hampshire residents might not have access to these funds due to a weakening of, through weakening amendments. The interesting thing that the state has to consider is the effect that these codes have on the actual ability to build in the state as well. Of course, it would make all buildings more efficient, but it would also likely restrict the ability to physically build the buildings themselves in a, cost-efficient manner. So that, even though it is the right thing to do, and we all want that to be done. There are multiple checks and balances there for sure. So
Yeah.
Other neighboring states are there already.
Yep.
I mean, that tells me it's not impossible.
It's not impossible by any means. Yep.
But it sounds like a good step is to first of all advocate for at least motion 2, if not motion 3.
Right.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that could be done is essentially push for those stretch goals now.
Yeah.
Right? Try to push for the adoption of 2021 code requirements through amendments of the 2018 code, therefore showing that essentially it's possible to continue that push forward and essentially show, not just
case
think.
studies out of that.
Exactly.
Municipal level case studies out of that.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly, and then be able to show that to state level officials to be able to prove that this is not as detrimental as they might think.
Yeah, for sure. And I think when it goes back to it, the cost argument is something that I've heard, I'm sure people have heard for 20, 30 years, like energy costs versus construction costs. One thing that's really important about these energy energy codes is that they provide a lot of great benefit to the occupants of the home. You know, they provide health and safety benefits by not having indoor pollutants come in because they're well insulated. They provide lower energy costs because it's well insulated, so you're not going to be dealing with higher energy costs associated with less efficient envelopes. So when it comes down to it, I think at the end of the day, although there's a little bit more upfront cost, the code pays for itself over time with the benefits you have through health and safety, the environment, all those that come together to, of course, potentially affect it. Yep. So
definitely.
Yeah.
Have you heard about a lot of pushback from general contractors or building code, inspectors, things like that, when towns have tried to stretch it further?
Yes, that's something that does happen here and there. So a lot of times when people see something they don't know, they always get defensive about it, not sure how to respond. So there have been a lot of times we have seen contractors and builders raise flags about the code adoption before it's sort of brought to a
I'd love to learn more about what's happened in Durham and Keene, especially Keene. That's a pretty radical. The green energy building, the green building code is considerably more far-reaching than the energy code. I'd just be curious if there's how long. Do you know how long those standards have been in place in those towns?
Yeah, I think I had it on the.
Oh, was it on the slide?
Slide, yeah. Let me take a look at that.
Sorry about that.
So it looks like Keene did it in 2016. And Durham adopted theirs in 2011.
Okay.
So.
Can I ask about another thing that I've heard of, and that's disclosure ordinances? So requiring developers to disclose what the energy efficiency is of a building. Does that fall into some of the options here?
Yeah, so one thing that's interesting with it is that to some degree, yes, there's one path to code compliance in the IECC that is for an energy rating index. And what that is basically a score that you get that's based on how well the home performs. And those are traditionally done through HERS ratings. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. But what those are, it's basically like a miles per gallon sticker for a car, but like for a house. So it's how well this house is likely to perform under the conditions, regardless of occupant behavior. So what those scores tell you is if you make those scores more transparent, you have the opportunity to see that, and that sort of goes on to some of that disclosure that's out there. So if you add some of these potential labeling systems, that could add that level of disclosure out there.
Yeah, it's interesting, almost if that's the first thing you do, that you get people comfortable with and regularly reporting those scores, right? So it just becomes part of the vernacular, part of what you do. Then it might make it easier. Then when you start to reach for some individual stretch codes, they're already comfortable with this kind of reporting and knowing that it's coming.
Right, and maybe kind of consumer driven, right? So people could choose where they want to house their business or what apartment they want to rent based on the energy efficiency.
Right.
And if that's disclosed up front, they can compare.
You can almost do that on a real estate listing as a value set, right?
Yeah, and I know the HERS index, which is sort of the common standard that's used for that energy rating index in the code, that's been around for a while, and that actually works in tandem with the real estate industry to sort of, you can have mortgages, you can finance some mortgages based on how well the homes are. So depending on the HERS score, it's tied to the mortgage industry. So if you have a really efficient home, they might give you a discount on the initial mortgage because they know that you're going to be saving that money and paying it back later on.
And those types of scores are actually pretty interesting, especially when some less official things are coming through as well. If you look on some of the more well-known realty websites, you'll see like Sun Score or something like that, just based upon the perceived clearance around the home and the orientation of the roof surface. They'll actually give it obligatory score of 68 if you got a mediocre exposure to your roof surface, if that has any interest to you. But, I've seen that a couple times between the larger sites as well, so.
Yeah, I use the HERS rating when I'm built, if I'm gonna do a solar quote for someone that's building a house and they get a HERS rater come in, that person can go through all of the HVAC equipment and all of the appliances and the HRVs and all of that to give us a really good sense of what this building's going to use for electricity.
Yep.
So that we can then size the solar array for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of reasons to do it.
Yeah, prior to my job in NEEP, I was actually a HERS rater, so if you guys have any more specific questions, let me know.
Very cool.
So, if any other questions we can talk through here? If not, let's go to the next slide, which is potential next steps you guys can take if you're looking to do this. So, first thing is sort of talk about potential discussion on what you want to do for a proposal, looking at the scope of what you want to include, a timeline, things like that. The town can draft a proposal, then look at a public advisory group of a TAG or TAC, which is a technical advisory group or committee, and refine the proposals based on some of the feedback you hear from that committee, host some public listening sessions so people from the community can have a say in what's going on, hear some feedback there. Then you could draft an ordinance for the stretch code, adopt the ordinance, and then publish some resources for implementing the code and training opportunities for builders and design professionals and raters who are going to be involved with the projects. So, so if you guys don't have any other questions, there's our contact information. Definitely feel free to reach out if you have any questions. We're happy to answer anything. And thanks so much for the opportunity to be here.
Oh, thank you very much for coming in. That was fantastic.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Great. Thank you, guys.
So, Michael, I'm wondering if there's an earlier step before all of that. To me, all of these options are sort of swirling in my head. How are there resources or are there ways for us to better understand the components of each of these that we could tap into?
Yeah, so we do have existing resources on our NEEP website that break down some of the specific components of the 21 IECC, so what's involved with it, where it is, and that sort of more specific technical guidance on what's in each aspect of the code. So if you're looking to learn about that in more detail, that's one opportunity. We could even potentially discuss NEEP drafting a potential stretch code for you. We've actually done that for Newcastle County, Delaware. So we have a proposal that we just sent to the county about a stretch code. So if you guys would be interested in that, we'd have to talk about potential ways to fund it, our involvement, but that could be another option too. And we're happy. We've also just provided a lot of resources on the code. You can read the code itself, which is free, available online through the International Code Council website. And if you guys have any specific technical questions, I'm always happy to answer them. So.
I thought you had to pay for it.
So there is a paid version of it. There's a free version as well. The only difference is that you can't copy and paste information on the free version.
Yep.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, it says it's actually written by a private corporation. It's not free to public. And, the ICC website is very available and very accessible as well for all code cycles and different codes that they have available as well. The material is fairly difficult to understand for people that aren't heavily involved. But I'm sure the NEEP is an excellent resource for guidance as to how to understand that.
Yeah, I guess I'm really seeing this just as this huge sort of understanding chasm, this huge gap between, small businesses and consumers and builders and electricians understanding the benefits and, extracting the code and boiling it down to the valuable assets that people could understand, make it more drinkable. I don't know if there's NEEP for Dummies tab or something on the site, but I think that even pursuing some ordinance stretch code options is really making it digestible that people really understand the benefit, right? Because there's going to be, there's going to be discomfort in changing, how we build things and how we do things, but understanding the benefit first makes all the difference, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some resources through Pacific Northwest National Laboratories on the benefits of energy savings, monetary savings, and jobs created through the energy code if you're moving from one cycle to the other.
Can you repeat that organization?
Pacific Northwest National Laboratories.
Great.
And they work through the Department of Energy.
Great.
So they provide resources, state by state specific data on those areas I mentioned. So energy cost savings, monetary savings over time, as well as jobs created through the additional engagement in the workforce. So,
yeah, I mean, what I see is like obviously looking at, for me specifically, I'm interested in the existing building benchmarks.
Yeah.
And obviously, but for that, being able to express to a citizen, what adding extra insulation in their home and going above and beyond will actually do for them, right? Is something that typically takes professionals to explain. And one of the things that obviously I'm sure your organization and others are able to provide is, the breakdown. Right?
Yeah.
X amount of extra insulation allows for X amount of retained BTUs, which therefore equals this amount of oil that is not burned.
Yeah.
And then they can do their own mental math as to, oh, wow, this is obviously way easier to do this so that I don't have to do this year after year.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ROI is really the difficult breakdown for anyone that's going to be investing in a energy efficiency project.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. And I know there are trained professionals that work on that kind of stuff as well. So I know the federal government provides some programs like Weatherization Assistance Program, which provides opportunities there. So there's a lot of incentive programs out there to sort of help support that kind of work.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, just in our own state, the NH Saves program helps hundreds of homes a year.
Yeah.
And are through utility programs that will cover significant amounts of dollar bills in the end for renewable energy projects, but in the same efficiency programs as well, including insulation projects, which not only do our citizens really need, can't really swing dollar-wise.
Yeah.
So just making it known that those programs are available is step one for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, we do that. Yes. I was just checking out who's on the Durham Energy Committee. I don't know anybody on this particular cycle, but we have been to Durham in the past when we were looking into the LED streetlights. We went to Durham because they had them before we did, because they were in the Eversource territory. We were first for Unitil. But I think we could have a field trip to Durham Energy Committee, or someone who used to know me, or they could come here and we could ask them how it's going. With what they do is they adopt the new one as soon as it
It's published,
comes
yeah.
out. Yeah. Their ordinance is we will always get a fresh one. We're not like 3 years behind. So we can ask them how that came about and how it is going.
Boy, especially you put that in context of the federal funding available to have an ordinance like that in place, means you're always in a great position. You're always ready to meet that,
Yeah, and if for whatever reason that's difficult to make happen in our own town, then we always have the ability to try and push specific stretch goals for specific situations that might benefit our town the most.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to have a field trip and sit with them and see what their successes and failures and challenges have been. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Cornelia, is there anything else you want to add to the discussion? I know she's still on.
She is, Cornelia? She may.
Hello, Michael. Was that addressed to me?
Yeah. Is there any other thing you want to add to the discussion?
No. If anyone else has any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but let me know.
Oh, thank you so much. It was
Yes, thank you,
Great
guys.
presentation.
Cornelia, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Michael, thank you
thanks
so
for your
much.
time.
And thank you for being so responsive. It was like one email that I sent and you were ready. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
I've been helped. Thank you, guys.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks. All right, thanks for coming out.
Take care.
All right, we will move on with our balance of our agenda. That was really great. This is going to be one of the ones to go back and watch the video. Even though I was here, I want to go back and watch the video, watch it, and listen to the questions and read the notes.
And I do have a copy of the slides, so I
Great.
can send that out to both committees.
Thank you.
Next action item is to have a bit of discussion on the single-use plastics document for Exeter and what the next steps could be, should be, would be. For those who don't know, Warrant Article 31 was a limitation on the distribution of single-use plastics on town property. It passed with pretty good margin, which I was happy to see. But now comes the work of the work. We have to figure out how to get that done through Kristen's great work. A lot of the language of the ordinance is terrific. I think we keep coming back to the enforcement, or I forget the better word we chose instead of enforcement, but how do we see that through? And I think there's a reasonable amount of public information and basic PR work to be done as well, to get the word out about it and all that. So yeah, I'd like to open the discussion on that. Again, it's a great milestone, but now we have to get to the point where it's manageable. Without cheating and looking, I think it was December 31, 2023. So permittees and town departments and anyone else that would fall under that umbrella had through December 31 of this year to use existing inventories of single-use plastics in any given circumstance, like the plastic cups on the water bubbler here, or things at Park and Rec. I know Greg at Parks and Rec has been really wonderfully aggressive pursuing all sorts of different options for the concession over there. But, to be, we're deeply immersed in this committee and people that worked on the language of that, like a lot of things that happen, people are busy with their everyday lives. So the objectives would be to work with the other committees that, the arts and arts committee, a lot of folks that have different touch points, certainly town manager's office, town clerk's office, people that, and the select board needing to approve permits and things like that, making sure that there's multiple touch points of information to people so people can understand what it does affect, what it doesn't affect, and that ever-growing list of options that we've created. But yes, so with that, yeah, I put it out there to start the discussion on what the next steps would be. And Kristen, maybe you should kick it off because you're so deeply invested in this.
I have a question first that maybe is a stupid question, so forgive me, but because it passed, the warrant article passed, that means it is adopted, or does it have to be voted on by anyone else?
I think that's a good question, and I don't honestly know the answer, and Dan, I don't know if you do, or if this was discussed. I didn't watch the last select board meeting. I do know that the town manager had some questions that were posed by legal counsel in terms of how it can be implemented or what that means, and I think it was related to, and it was mentioned, I believe, at the select board meeting that when you say town property, that includes town streets, and there was concerns that, general delivery truck transporting something to deliver to a downtown business might be considered distribution. I think that there's some alternative ways to interpret that, different from what our legal counsel initially felt. And so I don't know if there's been additional follow-up discussions with legal counsel. So I don't really know, and I need to have a sit down with Russ to talk a little bit more about that. I do know in terms of just to be as prepared as I can be for whatever might come down the pike, I did draft up the one-pager that we said we would distribute, and I think that was available
Yes.
for residents, or was that in your presentation?
It wasn't
I
in
can't
the
remember.
presentation, yeah, so we can.
So a one-pager that could easily describe to individuals what this ordinance does or does not do. And then the other thing is I've started to play with some of the application forms. So when someone wants to have an event, for example, the select board needs to sign off on it, and you know, right now they weigh in on things like, you know, did you have to sign off the date that you got approval, or are you serving food, and if so, did you get approval from the health department? And there's a whole series of check boxes that you have to go through. So I did play around with how to incorporate that language in there, but I don't know. I do need to sit with Russ to find out what those next steps are. I'm not entirely clear.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. That's helpful to hear what you've done. First of all, I want to congratulate the folks on the Sustainability Committee that put this on the warrant. You absolutely have the right to do what you did under our form of government, and you did it, and the town adopted it, so congratulations. The way the Select Board would like to proceed, in my understanding, is to have the Sustainability Committee and Kristen, your staff side resource, continue to take the lead. We would like proposals from you on how we are to implement this. And rather than enforcement, I think the right word is implementation. So the board is looking for the sustainability and Kristen's direction on how to implement. We will be working with our legal counsel when we receive those from you as well, because we don't want to make any missteps on that front. But that's really how we'd like to proceed. And again, congratulations. You used our form of government to push forward a issue that was not just important to you, but it turned out it was important to the town as well. So congrats.
Great.
And that's really where we are. We're waiting for you to kind of come to us with like, here's how we'd like to see this rolled out and implemented.
Great.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense, and that's helpful. So part of me wonders if it would be worth kind of reinvigorating or reconnecting as the subcommittee that got together to prepare the slides and sort of bounce some ideas off each other, and then maybe be ready to bring something back to SAC in May. I forgot what month it was. In May, and then be ready for the following select board meeting.
I think that's a great idea. And I think Chetna, who's missing, was our other person on the subcommittee, but I'm sure, we'll let her chime in when she gets back, but I'm confident she'd be great with that. And I think step one would be actually to identify the points that we need better clarification on as well, and to make sure we can know what we're going to move forward with and propose. But yeah, I think to be able to come forward to the May meeting with some discussion points, because I don't want to burn up the calendar on this. We've gotten it this far. I think there's things to sort out, but I think I want to see if we can do that pretty short order.
Yeah, maintaining momentum is important, for sure.
And freshness in the public's mind,
Of course.
too. Yeah.
Kristen and Dan, certainly, from if we get to a point in the May meeting, if the subcommittee can work with the individuals outside of a quorum and make sure we're all aligned on that, we can take, and if we're successful enough to get to the June meeting and be able to take a vote on that to present to the select board, how long does it take from us deciding as a committee to get on the agenda for a select board? How?
I don't think it'll take that long. Are you talking about putting something together in your meeting a month from now, in the May meeting?
Ideally, to have something together. I think if we're wildly successful, we get out of the May meeting with something to propose to the select board. But the realist in me says it might be another meeting after that.
Well, what I would do is, we're going to have our May meeting on the first Tuesday, right? The 2nd. So there's a select board meeting on the 15th. And maybe
that could be.
Someone could come and just give us if it's not on the agenda, you can always come to public comment and give us a quick heads up.
Yep.
If you're ready, after the 2nd, I'm sure that almost a 2-week gap between the meeting on the 2nd and the next select board meeting on the 15th of May.
Yeah.
I would be highly surprised that if you couldn't get on the agenda.
Great.
We are doubling up. We're going back-to-back meetings, the 15th and the 22nd.
Okay.
Because of Memorial Day.
All right.
So that's the schedule for May, after our May Sustainability Committee meeting. And then in June, let me just see, I don't think I have any select board meetings, but based on how things typically go, there'd probably be a meeting on the 3rd. No, I'm sorry, I'm in July, hang on. There'd be a meeting on the 5th and the 19th. That's a guess. Make those tentative, please. But yeah, so there's meetings on the 15th and 22nd of May, and then tentatively, the 5th and the 19th of June, just so you know what the schedule is. Okay?
Great, thank you for that.
Yeah?
So let's do that. We'll get Chetna and you and I, get subcommittee back together. We'll look at those. Wait, who was it?
Stacy,
Stacy, right. Oh,
right?
yes.
Just, Chris.
Is 4 a quorum, so you can't do?
Oh, that's a good point. Well, there.
No,
I don't
Kristen's not. She's sorry.
Okay.
I'm not.
No, just
Okay.
the one other complication that I didn't think about when we were talking about the schedule is there is the legal counsel component here.
Right.
Yes.
So that may dictate, like pushing it, depending on availability of
Right.
legal counsel. So
Yeah.
the sooner the better.
Yeah.
In terms of letting Nico, the chair, know what you'd like to do.
Great.
Okay. Sorry. Sorry to derail where you were.
Not at all, not at all. All right, so we can put that one to bed. We'll get the subcommittee reconvened to identify those things, and maybe, Kristen, we can work with you to reach out through the boss and talk to the legal counsel and just at least highlight for us what those, the key sticky wickets were there. That'd be great. All right, back to my agenda sheet. Are there other questions that you guys wanted to cover on the single-use plastics ordinance before we move on? Great. Speaking of subcommittees, there is also another subcommittee for solid waste review and discussion, solid waste disposal for the town. Chetna's also on that one. It's Chris, Stacy, and Chetna again. What's going on there? And we've had quite a bit of travel, but we've basically got to a point where we have a live document on this, and really first is identifying and benchmarking what's happening now. It's really getting getting a better understanding of what drives the solid waste contracts that we have now, the choices for what gets separated into what, and I remember in Budget Committee having a discussion with Jen Perry before she left about, I think we just recently renewed our waste management contract for several more years, so just kind of getting under the hood of that, I think. Then after we get a better understanding of what's happening now, set some goals for reductions and things, and then recommendations to meet those goals. So we started to build a document to kind of meet those 3 steps. At the high level, we want to basically explore and research options to reducing the solid waste disposal stream in ways that we can improve this at the curbside. I think some stretch goals would be to, look at, when we start to take this apart, it comes down to the almighty blue bag, and that's just permission to keep putting plastic into a landfill or an incinerator. So why do we need the plastic bag? Can we use other options? Well, of course, there's wet garbage. How do we get people to stop putting food waste in garbage? That means you have to amplify your composting, and then how do we make compost as part of our curbside offering? The idea being that using round numbers in the budget is approximately 1.2, or it went up a little bit from there, $1 million a year for solid waste removal. If we're comfortable spending that amount, or if that's the amount we're spending and approving, it doesn't necessarily dictate the 2 bins. It could be 3 bins, right? Is there another way of looking at how that's done? And so I think the end goal is to better streamline what we're collecting, and how we're disposing it, and ideally have our curbside collection at least reduce its role in being part of the problem and become a better part of the solution. So that's kind of where we are, and we hope to have a solid update, written update report when Chetna's back for the next meeting. Yes, sir.
I've done some reading on this. Really, solid waste is an organization problem. And the more highly refined you can get in terms of organizing materials, the more valuable it is, and the less likely it's going to end up in the landfill. So, I mean, that should be the goal for the town, is to have a more highly organized system for sorting materials. So, food waste is a great example. And how do you get people to comply or participate?
Yeah.
And then what is the method for collection? Is curbside the best way to go? I mean, that's the way we've always gone recently. But there's towns around us that don't do it that way.
Right.
Notably Rye. So
Yeah.
they have a very highly efficient organization system, but you do bring it to the transfer station. So.
It's interesting. I spent quite a bit of time in Europe in the Low Countries, and if you spend any time in Belgium or the Netherlands, even your metals are, you're responsible to separate your aluminums from your steels and that's just, but it's because it's been that way for so long, it's just how you do it. It's just, right. There's no other way. So yeah, I think you're right. It is the organization of it. And I also, part of it's also just addressing the shame of the burden that all of this is pushed down to the consumer. That there appears to be no upstream responsibility for, we use the pasta box as a great example. So many of our neighbors are doing the right thing by putting their empty pasta box in the cardboard recycling, save for that little plastic window in there, which is messing up the whole thing. And it's a big ask to ask every person that has a pound of pasta every week to knock out the plastic window.
I do it.
I do it too, because we're driven to. But it's again, so trying to come up with, you're right, the organization and making it as easy and simple and doable for everybody at every zip code. Yeah,
it's habits.
Yeah,
it's generating good habits, and you can basically say, well, it's good citizenship to be organized.
Yeah,
so.
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. And like when you talk about the value of that product, you're talking contamination. I mean, that is really what it is. I mean, to make any type of recyclable material valuable, it has to be literally as pure as possible in its recycled form. And otherwise, they're throwing whole batches of stuff away because they found one piece of contaminated material, and they can no longer guarantee that batch is in its purest form. And treating it as what it is, contaminated end product, is what it. We have to state it like that, because there are companies and people that treat these materials as valuable. They're valuable, yeah, and they literally make money off of this recycled material, and if they can't count on that material being pure, then it's no longer valuable to them.
Exactly.
So, therefore, it doesn't get done.
Yeah, that's the need for organization.
Yeah.
So more to come. Sorry.
Just to add to something to consider while the subcommittee is kind of coming up with a plan, and I can send this, but I believe it was in the winter, there was a grant deadline that passed that would have funded either a public outreach or education component around improving waste reduction. And so maybe that could be a part of what this committee considers. And I was trying to look it up, but I can't remember what the group
Yeah, and I think, did you
but
say
it was
that?
through EPA.
Yeah, and that was, you said, one that comes up often, though, wasn't it?
I think annually.
Annually, right,
Yeah.
yeah. So if we actually had our ducks in a row, it's something we could pursue next year.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Any other comments on that before we move to our next agenda item? Terrific. Another great one, Earth Week activities. We've got a note here about the clothes collection at the Exeter elementary schools. I'm going to pass the baton back to you, well, I think you've had more dialogue, but I can give an overview real quick. Last meeting, we talked about working with Helpsy, who's been working with the town on textile and footwear recycling. We've got bins at the transfer station, which have been apparently going very well. You can also call for curbside pickup as well. But the bins are great. And if you're watching at home, it's helpsy.co if you want to look up what these people do. It's a certified B Corp, and they take textiles that are functional. They have outlets for repairable functional stuff that needs to be recycled. They have outputs for that as well. And it's a terrific program. We had the idea that wouldn't it be a nice Earth Week activity to get the kids involved. We got Ryan McCluskey, the principal at Lincoln Street School, connected with Helpsy, and a nice conversation we had going. So they're going to get the students to make posters and drum up the awareness for it heading into Earth Week, and those bins will be at I don't know exactly if they're going to be sited between the two schools or at Lincoln Street School precisely, but they'll be at the school for the week. And so everybody in town can participate, and we'll help them promote that as well.
Yeah. And just to add to that, so Jordan with Helpsy.
Right.
They had invited, Lincoln Street School had invited her to present to the green team, their green team, which is kind of like an environmental club at Lincoln Street, but it includes teachers and parents and students, is my understanding. And so she was unable to sort of present about the program, and the goal for presenting was kind of to drum up excitement around this, get, the students, the teachers, and the parents really excited for this program, because what we're trying to do is drive folks to recycle their, unwanted textiles there, and then the school gets cut a check for the amount of pounds that they collect. And so with Jordan being unable to attend, I didn't know if it was something, he had also said it might be interesting for, them to just hear about some of the sustainable efforts that the town of Exeter is doing. So I want to put it out to this committee. It was April 13th from 3:15 to 4:15. And I do believe it is an in-person meeting, but I didn't know if folks here were interested in attending that meeting. I think having the connection with schools is really important to.
That would be great. Do you think Jordan would be able to supply us some information to present?
I'm sure.
Yeah, because I'd love to go do that. That would be great. Yeah.
Great.
It was April 13th?
April 13th from 3:15 to 4:15.
And I'd love as many of you all to join as you could.
That's at Main Street?
Is that
Lincoln Street?
Lincoln Street,
Yep.
got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to have the whole green team there, which I was really surprised at. And they've also been, the elementary schools have been working with Mr. Fox to do composting, and it's great to hear my fifth grader correct us on our composting at home and make sure that we're doing it right. It's pretty awesome. So they're getting, and it's great. We're just raising a whole new crop of environmentally minded kids, which I like. So. That's great. So I'll connect back with you, and we'll work with Jordan. And please, I'd encourage anybody who wants to join. We'll clear that with the principal, but I'm sure he'd be happy to have us. So, part of all this great stuff. Any more questions on that particular item, the Helpsy at the elementary school? Great. We'll move on to Alewife Festival, Kristen.
Yeah, so I am trying to get together an organizational committee to bring back the Alewife Festival. Last year was the first year that we had the festival since 2008, I believe. Or no, it would have been earlier than that because it was before I came on. But So last year, the approach was we staked out Founders Park. We had some outside speakers. New Hampshire Fish and Game came. They had some fish in hand, talked about New Hampshire fishes. The timing happened to be when the alewife migration occurred, so you were seeing massive numbers of alewives in, the now restored Exeter Squamscott River, which was really exciting. It was really engaging for members of the public. And then all of our environmentally based boards had a table on site. So we had Energy Committee, and they had, electric vehicle displays. SAC partnered with PEA, and you all did like a junk mail reduction outreach component, and on and on and on with all the different committees. Native plant, the tree committee did native trees. And so I would really like to bring this back again this year. I'm really far behind in the planning effort, but I'm hoping that maybe capitalizing on some of the pre-planning and work that we did last year will make it go a little smoother. So I set a planning committee meeting. It's a virtual meeting. I can't have a quorum of any committee there, but it is for Monday, April 10th. From 12 to 1 online. And really the goal is to kind of talk through some of the different proposals that we've had for, do we want to continue it at Founders Park, or do we want to move it down to the waterfront park? What are the hours? 9 to 1 is what we did last year. Is that still a good fit? And do we want to kind of mix up the format, or are we good with how things went? I will say that last year, I was making the posters and the displays and everything for each board, and that was just overwhelming. I cannot do that, but I'm willing to help at least, in whatever way, but I'm hoping that this is just committees are plugging into this event, and I'll help coordinate the event. So if you're interested in attending, please let me know. I think Chetna will still be out of town. Is that right?
Yeah.
So she won't be available, but it would be great to have some voice from SAC there to kind of talk through what some of the thoughts might be. And if there is interest among this committee, maybe it would be a good time now to talk about what some thoughts could be. And I know that's kind of on the spot and last minute.
That's okay. We did touch on it last meeting as well, so I'm sure we've had a chance to share some thoughts. I will say I'm overcommitted on my subcommittees, but I would love to encourage someone to join, because I think it's a when you talk to people about first of all, even understanding alewife and how they run and spawn and things like that, a lot of people don't know this is happening right here. Right. That it's reinvigorating and the reduction of fish ladders and things like that, and improving the health of the waterways. It's a really big deal, and we're really lucky to have it. So I'd love to see us get involved and look for somebody to join and step in. That'd be great.
What is the date?
That's the spirit, right.
It is April 10th, next Monday, from 12 to 1.
I have to check with work, but I'll certainly look into it.
Great.
That'd be awesome.
Thank you. And I mean, you have a lot to talk about, right? Like you can talk about the plastics initiative. You can there's I think even rerunning the junk mail approach, but have a way for people to be able to opt out right there on a computer or something like that could be a great option. We still have the poster downstairs. And I believe all of the websites, so the poster linked to several different websites that tell you what are your free resources for opting out of junk mail and what types of junk mail do they opt you out of, and then what are the options for pay for service approach. Even that alone would be an incredible and easy lift. This year I'm kind of thinking as a way to sort of drive the movement around to the different tables to have, and this is just in concept and no one else has really weighed in on this, so if we can all just agree to diss it, but is to have a postcard where, so we'd have some sort of raffle kit that could have, maybe like a rain barrel or a t-shirt or insert something there. And the Conservation Commission funds might be able to be used. They do have outreach funds to purchase some of those supplies. So it's like a $28 supply kit, maybe Public Works could donate the rain barrel, and then we'd have stamps where each table would put a stamp, kind of like the
passport idea, yep.
Passport or stealing from like, insurance, health insurance round world tours or whatever those things are called. So you get a stamp from each of them, and everyone who has a complete postcard can then deposit it as a raffle for the basket.
That's a great idea.
So that's what I was thinking of, but open to whatever. So those are the kinds of things that we'll talk about on Monday.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a crazy idea for the Sustainability Advisory Committee to capitalize on making the connection between single-use plastics and the waterways, and because I also think there's still a lot of questions out there as well as what does it really mean, but there's some, even the slide material from the data we presented to the select board, a lot of that's tied to the waterway and the microplastics and all that, so it would help reinforce that and help build understanding, I think, as well. So, just an idea. So.
Great.
Any other questions or thoughts on AOF committee before we move on? Or AOF festival?
When is the festival again?
Oh, I didn't say that, I don't think. So May 13th, it's Saturday, May 13th. That was basically on Fish and Games availability, because I figured that fish are kind of like the key component. And even if fish aren't running during that time, which they felt that was a good, secure date that they should be, unless something aberrant happens with the weather, they would still be able to catch fish from a fish ladder and bring it down.
Okay, so they can just cue the AOF and toss it in. Okay.
Or at least, everyone can see a lamprey, which always gets the crowd oohing and awing.
We were talking a little bit about environmental film screening, this Climate Gen Z mental health climate stories. I don't remember who was spearheading that. I think that Chetna was spearheading that. So unless there's more information to add on that, I'm going to just suggest we pass on that till next meeting. Makes a lot of sense, but I don't have any background information on it.
Yeah, she was looking into availability of some of the facilities at PEA in order to host the film festival. And I think we don't have an answer, so it makes sense to punt till.
Okay. And then we had final action item was grants. Let's talk about lists and deadlines for water bottle refill stations and update on all that material.
Yep, so I have some bad news on that. One, I was super delayed in I've been struggling with the grant we agreed to apply to were the Charitable Foundation's Express grant, I think it was. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And Adam had agreed to kind of let me bounce some language off of him. I also spoke with Scott Ruffner because they are a 501c3 and also supportive of having a water bottle refill station at Swayze. So I was supposed to draft some response to the application questions and bounce it out to both of them. But I just haven't. I really have struggled with the responses. And then just before coming here, I wanted to check deadlines. And I did give language to Adam just this afternoon, which had at least one question answered. But I found out that they're no longer running the Express grants in 2023. Now they're all being moved to a different type of grant, like an unrestricted grant, which is a good thing. But the deadline's September 8th. And their questions won't come out until May 1st. So it kind of pushes the whole thing back a bit, which is a disappointment to me. I like the Express grants because it was a rolling deadline and it was 3 months and then and you maybe could hit the ground running, but that's not an option. So my thought is we had a list of a couple different grant options and I haven't looked at the deadlines of those, but in addition to prepping, keeping my eye out for the May 1st application questions, I would also like to revisit the other grant opportunities that we talked about, because I think there was another one that was a rolling deadline. It might have been like the Walmart one.
I think it was Walmart Family Foundation, wasn't it? Yeah.
So, but I don't have the research for that done, and I will just fully admit, like Earth Day, looming is like the busiest time. So it's hard to pull all this stuff together at this time of year. But I think that we're committed to make some progress, right, Adam? You're not ready to diss my...
Oh, not at all. No, it was very good, very good. I've had a few thoughts, but I think it was excellent, so.
Okay, so, and I think it's a strong proposal, especially with partnering with Team, who brings a lot of vibrancy to this community, and then have such a visible location where so many residents visit, that if we had interpretive signage there that was encouraging and positive and made people feel really good about their choice to use that over getting a plastic bottle of water or whatever, I think it's a good sell. It's really hard to get creative in writing.
No, I get it. And so one curiosity, and we wanted to work with Team because they're a 501c3, and in that, we could ostensibly raise funds a variety of other ways, not necessarily just through a grant, right? Would it have to go through, just for clarity and transparency, it'd be nice to run it through a nonprofit, I would guess, right?
You mean, could
Like
SAC say, hey, donate to this cause kind of thing?
Right. It was like, for that particular grant, it was a requirement.
Right.
But there's other grants that we apply for that municipalities can apply for and things like that. Because the only thing I thought between our last meeting and this was, there's a pretty successful mechanism for rounding up in a lot of retailers, and then I thought, well, how would we apply that to the town? No one wants their water bill to go up, but if you could opt in $1 on your water bill every quarter to help pay for a drinking fountain and Swayze Parkway, in some of the other correspondence that we already have going with everybody in town, especially I like that one because it was kind of tied to the water system anyway. I don't know what barriers and hurdles there are to do that, but adding $1 to your bill to pay for something like that seems like a slam dunk to me. I don't know why, but it just feels like it would be.
Yeah, my assumption would be we'd need to establish some sort of fund for the purpose, and that would be something we'd need to work out with the select board and the town. I don't know. I know, just speaking from another municipal example, the city of Dover has on all of our tax bills, do you want to donate to like the conservation fund, enter amount, insert whatever, and you can enter the amount, and for that year you just write in your amount and it goes to that fund, but you'd need to set the fund up in advance, I would imagine. But every town is different. We have a city council, which is very different from select board approach, so I don't really know. But could be worth looking into.
I might recommend that to our select board representative, that we figure out a way to have that discussion anyway and just see what's possible. There's a...
Yeah, why don't you bring that along with the implementation suggestions? That'd be great.
If it's not possible, great, but at least we should have the discussion, right?
Yeah, there's a water and sewer advisory committee as well, so.
Of course there is.
Bob Kelly's quite a power on that.
Yeah.
Want to loop Bob in.
Yeah, for sure.
So I do have a bunch of stuff on other business when we get to that.
That's our next stop. I guess with that, we'll move to other business. Go ahead. Number 5, other business.
So the first one, I don't have anything to provide to you tonight, but I have been working on sort of like a graphic annual report of sustainable efforts. And so I'd like to send that to you guys and maybe get some feedback for the categories that I've included and the metrics that I'm using, so that at the next meeting, ideally, you can give me feedback. No, let me say it differently. So I'd like to provide that to you as kind of homework if you're willing, right? Sure. And if you have comments or thoughts, if you could send that directly to me, so that when we come to the next meeting in May, I could have basically a final draft that the SAC could bless, and then we could share with the select board. I know having an annual report was also a goal of SACs, so obviously I want to make sure that helps you meet that goal as well.
Sure.
But anyway, but it's, to me, I'm very visual, so it's just graphics. It's very little text. Maybe a little bit text, but mostly graphics.
I think it's terrific.
But it has metrics like, how much went to the landfill this year, how much was recycled, how much did Help Seek collect, how much did Mr. Fox compost, and then how many EV chargers do we have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then my thought is that's something simple enough that we could rerun every year and kind of compare year to year.
That's a great idea.
Okay, so that's one. And then I'll just go through a few others. Community cleanup, I sort of roped SAC and the Conservation Commission into this, but Chetna, I'm pretty sure, did agree to it. So you are all sponsors to a community-wide cleanup, basically from April 17th to April 21st. Anyone can go to Public Works to pick up gloves and bags, and safety vests, and then on your own there are safety guidelines that you need to follow, but on your own you could choose an area in town, one of your neighborhoods, a street side, whatever that is, to clean up. And then you have the option to either take those bags and drop them off on Saturday, the 22nd, which is actually Earth Day, at the Crossroad landfill. It would be free. You wouldn't have to pay for that, obviously. Or if it's bulky and you don't want to put all that stuff in your car, that's totally fine too. The following week, you just need to contact Public Works and let them know where the bags are sitting, and they'll have a crew out that following week to clean it up. So I think this might be the second or third year that we're running it, but it's a great way for residents townwide to kind of lend a hand, especially in spring when we have all these snow piles around and trash kind of collects. So there's that.
What's the date range for that?
So the pickup dates are April 17th through the 21st. And you'd pick up at Public Works, which is off of Newfields Road, and they're open from 7 to 3:30.
Okay.
And then your cleanup can be whenever you have your supplies, but you don't want to have a ton of trash sitting around super long. Saturday, the 22nd, from 9 to 2:30, you can drop off the bags on your own. And then April 24th, that full week, is when Public Works will go behind and help with the cleanup.
Cool.
And then I had one last thing. And that's, and this is nothing that really needs action today, but more to plant the seed. So I was at a meeting with Seacoast Eat Local, and I know SAC, Energy, Concom, you've all kind of separately and individually talked about having joint committee meetings to do something together. And I think it would be fantastic. And at the Seacoast Eat Local meeting, when we were talking about the farmer's market, I need to slow down. They had said what would be really cool is if there was something once a month to sort of highlight about the farmers market, to sort of help us with advertising, re-energize, just something to like boost up the farmers market. Not that it needs it. And I say all of this with the caveat of we're still trying to figure out where the farmers market's going to go, right? Or if it can still continue at Swayze Parkway. But I thought, so there's six, that would be 6 farmers market days during their active season. If you did it once a month, it would be 6 times. It would be great if like early on SAC maybe you do have a budget, produce like some grocery bag, like reusable grocery bags with something about sustainable Exeter, or some logo that you want to produce. And then another one like Concom could do a kayak tour afterwards, or you know what I mean? I think that there are opportunities for our boards to engage in the farmers market that way. I think it would be a great way to highlight all the good stuff that you do. Also have another location where the public is seeing you in person. So food for thought, and if that's something that that you think you could generate energy around, we should talk about it at the next meeting.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, I guess I haven't really, I forgot about all the the construction's still going on there, will they be able to get it? Yeah. So when's their first outdoor date?
May 14th.
Okay.
I don't know. That's not right. I don't know.
Okay. Interesting.
I did know, but I don't remember.
Yeah, just come up with an interesting way to, I guess for me, everything always starts out with the objectives.
It's what you say with possibly doing like reusable bags.
Yeah.
Since we're asking them to get rid of plastic, could kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, one that actually meets the guidelines that we've put forward.
Right.
I know, that's quite a rabbit hole, the reusable bag.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's,
May 11th.
May 11th. We could probably get a co-sponsor or something, because I don't think our budget will go very far for the ones that are actually
Probably not.
reusable. Like 5 bags, man, then
First 5 customers.
but yeah. Yeah, that would be a good thing.
But you can, for a pretty reasonable, maybe they aren't the sturdiest bags, but you can go buy at a craft store, right? Some reusable bags and like the iron-on stuff, and maybe we have an iron-on party, and that's how you achieve it.
That's a good one. Yeah, definitely. And so we'll make sure we put that on the agenda, if everybody wants to bring some ideas for that.
And I think so. You have a $1,500 budget. A portion of that ideally goes to the to our Clean Energy New Hampshire dues membership. That's the word, and to the New England Municipal Sustainability Group membership, but the rest of that is kind of yours. And it's really good to use it. Like, it's really bad when it sits there.
Yes.
So.
Agreed.
So could we ballpark say $1,200-ish? Okay.
Yeah, I would say less than that. I would say like 900.
Okay,
Yeah.
come up with your best $500 idea.
Right, yeah, that's what I was, exactly.
That'll be $900 before you know it, so. Excellent. Any other business in the other business category? Great. Any other questions on anything we talked about tonight? Great. Well then, I'm pretty confident we never close this meeting appropriately. Do I need to seek a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Yes.
Can I get a motion to adjourn this meeting?
And then you need a second.
Can I get a second? Then I can
then you take a
to
vote.
vote. Can I, everybody in favor of closing the meeting, adjourning the meeting? Say aye.
Aye.
Great. Meeting's closed.
perfectly done.
There we go. Might be the first time we.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.